Hi there, my name is Jack Wallen and I'm here again for another Linux 101. I don't know why I said it like that, but hey, two things before I get started. Number one, it's new tattoo day. Woohoo! Huzzah, huzzah! This isn't some big barbaric shoulder sleeve thing. It's just protecting my fresh ink. Second, but hopefully maybe the next time I film a video, it won't be there. You'll be able to see the beauty that is on my shoulder. Oh, here's this. You might not have seen this before. This is the Ubuntu logo from a decade ago. No, more than a decade, like 2 decades ago. It's a long time. It's old. And I have my Linux Penguin here. I was actually at one point going to get all of the logos from all of the distributions I've used over the years on my right arm. But eventually I said, no. I don't need that. That would look silly. No, I don't want to explain it and blah, blah, blah. So, but I decided to keep this one because Ubuntu is not just the logo. It's not just about a Linux distribution. It means community. And I like that because we need community in this world. Not just Linux community. We need community everywhere because we will survive as a community. So the second thing I want to say is this is sort of a PSA sort of thing. I'm trying to add this to all of my Linux 101 videos. About a week or so ago, I reviewed an app for ZDNet called Linux Assistant. Now I'm going to try to remember to put the link to the review in the description here because I think you're going to want to use this app. Linux Assistant is essentially a search tool, but it does much more than that. For example, and don't shame me for this because I had a reason for it, I'm sure. I don't remember what it was, but I had a reason for it. When I installed Linux Assistant and it walked me through the first run wizard, it detected that my firewall wasn't running. It said, do you want me to start your firewall? I said, sure, Linux Assistant, start that firewall. Do your thing. And it does other things. But so it's more than just a search tool. It can do all sorts of things. Like once you've got it running, you type like the letter S. A bunch of commands, it'll show commands, it'll show files, folders, and you can, it's really cool because if you forget the name of a command or a folder, you just start typing and it'll auto-populate. So auto-populate. And it's one of those apps that you're going to install, you're going to open, and you're going to leave it open all the time. Sort of like I leave Warp Terminal open all the time for various and sundry reasons. I also leave Linux Assistant open all the time. And it's great. Read the review. I think you're going to want it. Install the app. It's pretty awesome. There you go. Now let's talk about the subject at hand. Linux file permissions. Now, the reason why Linux file permissions is important is because it is yet another layer of security on your system. And it was designed as such so that users can easily manage the permissions of files and folders on their systems. And it's great. There are 3 ways to manage those file permissions. There's the really easy way, there's the easy way, and there's the hard way. I'm not going to talk about the hard way today. The hard way is more of a 201 series because we have to talk about security bits and all those other things. And I don't want to do that because this is Linux 101 and I don't want to confuse anybody. So we're going to talk about the really easy way and the easy way. The really easy way is all about the GUI. Yeah. Your file manager, whether you use GNOME, KDE, XFCE, Elementary, Wii, whatever, it doesn't matter. You have a file manager on your system. If you open your file manager, let's just say you navigate to a folder or a file in your home directory. If you right-click that file, you'll see a permissions tab. Click on that permissions tab and you'll see how easy it is to give different groups the permissions they need for that file. And you click OK and you're done. You can even add executable permissions with that GUI. It's all good. It's a great way. I use it sometimes. Sometimes I use the terminal, sometimes I use the GUI. It depends. If I have the file manager open already and I see the file there, I just right click it and I'm good. Now, if I'm delving into the file system hierarchy, like a file within the Etsy directory, I'm not going to do that with my terminal or my GUI because I would have to open the file manager with sudo permissions and blah, blah, blah. So that's when you need to That's when you need to get in deep with the somewhat easy method, the easy method. That's the really, file manager is the really easy method. This terminal method is the easy method. So let's talk about that. But before we get into the how, let me give you a little bit of information that you're going to want to have before you jump right in. On Linux, there are 3 different permissions that we're going to talk about. There's read, write, execute, aka RWX. R, read, W, write, X, execute. And there are 3 different users or groups you need to know about. User, group, other. Now, what are those? Well, user is you. User is a user on the system. It's you. Or if you have you and maybe your significant other that logs into the system, it might be you and Gilly. Here's a little bit of trivia. If you've ever read my articles, especially those that deal with commands, you will notice that I use different names for those in those commands. Like if I have to use, if I'm changing the file permissions, I'll use Olivia as the user, or I'll use Jit or Gilly or Nathan or whatever. Unless my name is in that command, I am using names from books I've written, characters in books I've written. So Olivia is from the Clockwork Cabaret series. Jit and Gilly are from my Aftermath series. Nathan is also from the Clockwork Cabaret series. So that's just a little bit of trivia there. So that's what a user is. Group is a group. Users belong to groups. Groups are really important. Why? Because groups make it really easy to manage the permissions of files and folders for multiple users. You don't want to have to manage the permissions for files and folders for every single user on the system. You could have 1,000 users on a system. You don't want to have to go and manage those permissions user by user. So you create a group, you add the users to the group, and then you give the group the right permissions they need. I'm going to actually walk you through that in a minute. So you have user, group, but then there's this other. This nebulous other. What is other? Well, other's everybody else. Others, anybody that logs on the system, system accounts, whatever. I think, this is just my opinion, so please don't anybody get offended. I think that got kind of lazy. I think it would have been nice to have 4 groups. I think it would have been nice to have user, owner, group, other. And then other could be like system accounts. So owner would be the person that created the file. User would be any user on the file or on the system. Group would be any group on the system. Other would be system accounts. That's just my opinion. My opinion doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to happen, but that's just the way it is. Okay. So we've talked about the GUI. Right click, set the permissions you want. Bam, you're done. But what's this command I keep talking about? The command is chmod or chmod or chmode, but chmode sounds too much like commode, so we don't say commode, chmode or chmod. Chmod just sounds silly. Chmod. Now, I'm actually going to talk about 4 different commands. I'm going to talk about chmod, chown, group add, user mod. Because those are the necessary commands you kind of have put together to do what I'm going to do. Now, you don't have to do that for everything. First, I'm going to show you how to just use chmod to change the permissions of a file. Let's say you've created a backup script, and that script is backup.sh. And it's in your, let's just say it's in a scripts file in your home directory. So dot or tilde / scripts, backup.sh. When you create that file as a user, that file automatically gets user read write permissions. It doesn't, however, get executable permissions. You have to add that. You want to be able to execute your backup.sh script. How do you give it executable permissions? It's really easy. Thanks to chmod. The command would be chmod tilde / scripts / backup.sh. Wait a minute, I forgot something. Let's go back. Rewind. It would be chmod. Gosh darn it. Let me just tell you something. When I do these videos, I hit record on my camera and I just start talking. It's unscripted. I'm going to screw up and I don't edit. This is all one take because that's just how I am. You're going to get me warts and all. Okay, so let's give backup.sh executable permissions for the user. That's you. So the command would be chmod u plus x tilde / scripts / backup.sh. Or if you're in the scripts folder, it would just be chmod u plus x backup.sh. You have essentially given, not essentially, you've given backup.sh executable permission, but you only did it for user. So now user has executable permissions, user being you. Okay, that's a good start. But what if you wanted to give user write permissions to the file? Let's just say you only have read permissions, because there's going to be other users on your system. Like I said, out of the box, that file that you've created has user read write permissions, but the other users on the system, the users that are not the owner, the users that did not create the file, only have read permission. If you want to give everybody else or other users write permissions, it would be chmod u plus w backup.sh. Probably don't want to do that. You probably only want you to be able to edit that file because it's a backup. Okay, let's have a little fun here. And in having the fun, you will better understand how user permissions work. What we're going to do is we're going to create a group. Why, like I said, why do you use that? The reason why is because it makes managing permissions much easier. So we're going to create a group. We're going to create a group. We're going to then create a folder, and then we're going to change the ownership of the folder so that the group has access to it. And then we're going to add a user to the group, and then we're going to change the permissions of the folder such that the group has read, write access to any file or folder in that directory. It's really cool. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a group. Let's say we're going to call it editors, because I'm a writer. I think of editors all the time. So we're going to create the group like this: sudo group add editors. Simple. We've added a group called editors. Now, let's create a folder. Let's say we want to create a folder called data on the root directory. We're going to do that with sudo mkdir / data. Awesome. But the problem is you have to have sudo permission to access, to work with any file or folder in that. Let's say you've dumped a bunch of files and folders in data. Okay. We've added the group called editors. Now, what we want to do is we want to change the ownership of the folder to editors. We're not going to change the owner, the user, but the editor or the group. To do that, you would do sudo chown -R :editors / data. Okay, let me explain that. That -R means recursive. What that does is that it doesn't just apply the permissions to, or the ownership to the main folder data. It applies the ownership to all of the child folders and files within data. Now, that's important, because if you don't do that, if there are other files or if there are other folders in there, any member of that group is not going to be able to access those child folders or files. So we need to do that. Okay, now the next step in this is we've got to add users to the group. Because right now we've got an empty group. We want to add users to it so that we can then, so that any member of that group would then have the permissions of the group for that folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the usermod command. And we do that like this: sudo usermod dash lowercase a, capital G, editors, and then username. Username being whatever user you need to add to that group. So like sudo usermod dash a, capital G, editors, Jack. We've just added Jack to the editors group. Now, the change won't take effect until Jack logs out and logs back in. Once he logs out and logs back in, he is then a member of the editors group. Okay. We've added our group. We've added a user to the group. We have added the directory. We've changed the ownership of the directory to editors. Now, we need to give the group read and write permission to the data folder. We do that with sudo chmod ug plus rw /data. Now, anybody in the editors group has read-write access to any file or folder in data. That's how it's done. That is essentially file permission in a nutshell. It's not nearly as hard as you think. So there's one more thing I want to explain. I just remembered. So you remember when we chowned data such that it was owned by editors? Remember I said : editors? Well, here's how that works. Anything on the left side of the colon is user. Anything on the right side of the colon is group. We're not changing the user ownership. Now, if we wanted, let's say we had a username editor and a group name editors, it would be sudo chown dash capital R editor : editors /data. So just remember that. Left side is user, right side is group. I know it's a whole lot to remember. That's why I started out with just giving executable permissions to a backup script, because you kind of get the gist of how it works. And we sort of then jumped ahead a little bit, because I think one of the easiest ways to explain permissions is by using groups and all of that. So it shouldn't, once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. And for the most part, if you are the only user on a Linux system, you're probably not going to have to do a whole lot of this. It's only when you start getting multiple users on a system and you start dealing with groups on a system and things like that, that you're going to have to start managing permissions for files and folders on a system. You could essentially go your entire life on a Linux distribution, desktop distribution, and never have to run the chmod, the chown, or the user, or the usermod command. Very likely. But on the off chance that you do need it, now you know how to use it. And it's not nearly as intimidating as you think it is. And essentially that is user permissions on Linux. Now, like I said, there's a harder way to do it. There's a chmod 777 backup.sh. I just pulled that out of my head, out of my butt, out of my armpit, out of whatever, out of thin air. We'll talk about that permission system later, because it's a little daunting, because it's a lot to remember. And one of the last things I want people that are new to Linux to think is that, oh my gosh, I've got to run all these really complicated commands and I can't remember it all. What am I going to do? You see, that is one of the reasons why I often hesitate to talk about commands in a Linux 101 environment. Unless it's like a Linux server 101, then you've got to. But sometimes it's kind of cool, even for users who are brand new to Linux, to see how much flexibility the operating system has. And it does. It is incredibly flexible. But this is not something you're going to have to worry about for a while when you first start using Linux. Yes, you might create a backup script and you need to give it executable permissions, or you might download an executable file. Be very, very careful with that, people. Please be very, very careful. Only download executable files from repositories and people that you trust. I have gotten to the point now where if I want to install an application and I have to add a third-party repository for my system, I will hesitate. I will spend time looking up that repository, looking up the owner of that repository to see if they can be trusted. And even then, I will turn to Snapper Flatpak and see if there's a Snapper Flatpak version of that, so I'm not installing a third-party repository that could do harm to my system. You just have to be very careful. I guess you got 2 PSAs in this video. Anyway, thank you so very much for giving me a little bit of your time. It means the world to me. And I hope that maybe I have helped you along the way today. Maybe you understand Linux file permissions a little better. Yes, I didn't get very deep into it, but that was intentional. Keep coming back. I've got more to talk about. If you enjoy what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. I'm not trying to make money off this channel. I'm just trying to give back, just trying to help. I love helping people. Thank you again, and I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.